Maybe they could just talk a little quieter. Hey,
They are quiet. It's the thing. I don't know what's going on.
we're live.
Hey,
Welcome back. Welcome
good
back to
morning.
a table for 7 billion.
Yep.
I'm
And,
I'm James,
and I'm
and
Chef Olive. And we did
that
count.
guy, that guy, that guy.
We did count 7 billion, right?
Yeah,
We
we've
are
done the count. We've done the math, and there are 7 billion people on this planet, and we've made a reservation for all of them right here every Monday at 1 o'clock.
it may be a little
So,
line.
yeah. I don't think our viewership is quite up to 7 billion yet, but we're getting there.
Patience, patience.
Yeah. I mean, this is only our
So
third episode back, so
yeah, so back to our little show, and we're gonna talk about food again. And we're
we
gonna
are going to
go
talk
and
about food.
we're gonna talk about a lot of the ingredients, and we're gonna start having guests when we have when we everything is working well, because we have a
Yeah.
few things to make sure we work, and we have a lot of guests that wants to come back on the show. So
Yes.
yeah, it's gonna be fun. So maybe in a couple of weeks we can start with a few people already ask us to be on the show. So that's great. We want people in the food business, and I'd love to hear from chefs and bartenders around. I would rather go with unfamous people than famous people. Famous people have a lot of voice already, and I think James and I, we want to
What
hear
about
about
me?
the other, except for you.
Yeah.
We want to hear about other people, like the people that are actually working in restaurants. We want to hear like
Right.
unbiased and fun and like true things. So most of the people we know, uh, they're not the super famous people, and that's what we want to hear about. Anyway,
Right. Right. I would like to apologize in advance because I have somehow come down with a cold. So if I sound funny, I can't help it. I'm just a funny guy. So
the cold.
a cold. Uh, funny, I
All
don't
right.
feel
So
cold.
how did
So
we start this podcast? Why did we change the name? So the name was Quarantine Fire. We changed it. We scrapped that. Right. We have a whole new show. It's kind of the little bit the same, but more in depth. And we're gonna go back to all the cool subject that people love to hear about. Right.
right, and
All the
we're
food.
we're not in quarantine anymore, of course. Although we are still in separate studios. I'm at my home office. Olive is somewhere. I'm not sure where. He's somewhere in a land
Auckland.
called Oakland, and
Auckland.
I don't have a visa to go to Oakland, so I just broadcast from here. It's really hard to get into Oakland these days, you know.
And that's too bad.
Yeah. I'm kidding, of course. I love Oakland. Don't get over there as much as I'd like, but I have no life. I don't get out, so I'm
No,
I'm
Auckland is
here at
really
this
cool.
desk.
It's really cool.
Oakland is very cool,
It's
and
very, very cool.
considering
There's a lot. But right
considering
now,
what Oakland is like today, as opposed to when I moved here
oh
25,
wow, yeah, I know. Me too.
26, 27 years ago, it's amazing. It's
It
just a
changed a lot.
really happening place.
It's still very difficult. Lots of restaurants are closed. I gotta say, it's still.
Yeah,
But some people are reopening. Some people are closing. It's just like it's gonna be an interesting few months in ahead, because I mean, I talk to restaurant people all the time. I go see them. Some people are gonna close. Some people they can't do it anymore. It's been
right.
and some people are reopening places. So it's like
Yeah, some people have already opened new restaurants in spaces that were abandoned during the
yeah.
pandemic. So life goes on, and we wish everyone well. And some people just couldn't be closed for a year and survive.
And I think people
Um,
are tired. A lot of the people I talk to, they don't want to do that anymore. That's not what they sign up for. The restaurant is a really convivial place, and now it's not happening. So
yeah, and also the nature, because of the pandemic, that's what started it. The
yeah,
nature of restaurants is bound to change. I think there's going to be a major shift in how people open restaurants these days. Um,
right. So
moving
yes,
away from table service to
yeah. So that's not. You're gonna see that it's gonna be a lot of new people coming in, because the people like us that have a traditional training on really taking care of the people. I don't think we're gonna be able to do that. It's
but I
gonna be
think
it's gonna
but
be
I
a
think
different it's gonna be a different perspective.
but I think customer service will evolve. I think there's still a
Yeah,
way to welcome
sure.
people, make them feel comfortable without necessarily having a server at their table every 5 minutes. And most people think of a place where you go into the counter and you order your food and then you go sit down. They think of that as like fast food, but there's really no reason you can't do really, really good food that way. So it's going to change, and
Yep.
who knows what
But
it'll be like 5, 10 years from now.
we don't know. The truth is we don't know.
But we
We're
do
gonna
know,
go
but we're
with
not
the
allowed to
flow,
tell you.
and we're gonna talk about the food anyways, because the food doesn't change.
Right.
Ingredients don't change. The way we need to eat doesn't change. All this doesn't change. It's the perception that changes. And the restaurant is gonna be one thing, and we'll see what happens. I don't know. Like honestly, I don't know.
So we thought
So
we'd
where do
start
we?
today by finishing up a little bit about our
Yeah,
backgrounds, and
yeah.
and we talked a lot about, Chef Olive grew up in Paris. His mother had a restaurant. Your family, going back, has had restaurants since the 19th
1750s.
century,
Yeah,
1750s.
yeah.
Gosh, I
Long
was so young
time.
then. So restaurants are really in your blood, and you've worked in restaurants virtually your whole life, right? I mean, since you were a wee lad.
15. I worked since I was 15. Lots of restaurants, different types of places. One of my first job, the second job was a pizzaiolo. That's when I learned how to make pizza in Aix-en-Provence. And then I moved to LA when I was 20. So I was 15 when I worked with my mom. Then I traveled a lot after. And then I went to work in south of France, and I was a pizzaiolo in a really cool pizza place. And then I moved to, I work in a restaurant in Aix-en-Provence because in Aix-les-Milles, which is the airport next to Aix-en-Provence, there was a school, there was a flying school, which I was taking to be a pilot. And then when I got my license, I moved to Los Angeles to get a new license new pilot license in LA, still working in the restaurant. And then every time I try to do something else, I always go back to the restaurant because that's what I love the most. And that's pretty much it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But we'll talk about more about my whole crazy experience in the restaurant because my life is filled with that. So we're gonna have lots of stories for you, and this is what people love. They love stories, right? I mean, this is what it's all about.
My very first restaurant job was actually as a bartender. Um,
Yeah,
a friend of mine, and it's very funny because a friend of mine that I was in theater, and the friend of mine that I was doing a play with was a bartender at this very popular
right.
restaurant called Misty's, and they were famous for their prime rib, and they're really big into Nebraska football and all that. Well, he got me a job there. They actually had a football shaped bar, which was very funny because they were all about
Oh wow,
football.
that's cool.
So he got me a job there, and I knew absolutely nothing about tending bar.
Right. Yeah, me
And
neither.
so when I first started, I would go to him like every time somebody ordered a drink, and I'd say, "Hey Matt, what's in a Manhattan? Hey,
Oh yeah, I
how do
know,
I
I
make
know.
it?" And of course, the drinks were very different then because it was very common in those days, especially in that part of the country. This is in Lincoln, Nebraska, to make, for example, if somebody ordered a whiskey sour, you put a shot of bourbon in the glass and
Right.
ice, and then you filled it with
Yeah.
squirt out of the gun. Basically a sour mix, and it was basically squirt.
Oh, I
Uh,
know. Oh my
and
God. That's
that's what a whiskey sour was, and then you dropped a cherry or something in it. And for years, and I've written about this, that I believe this is why a lot of people of a younger generation got turned off to cocktails, because they saw cocktails as the way their parents drank cocktails, which was stuff like that. And a margarita was margarita mix and cheap tequila. And so they just thought cocktails were gross, which they kind of were.
yeah, I know, and it was pretty un interesting at the time. It was some of them were great, the classics, right?
I mean,
Now
some of them
people
were
are.
perfectly tasty, but they tended to be very
Oh
sweet.
my God, I.
People liked a lot of soda with their liquor because it kind of disguised the taste of the alcohol. And,
That's when
you
I was.
know,
That's what. That's when I started. When I work at Latok, so my first, I would say, nice restaurant, I was 20 years old.
Yeah.
At Latok in LA, and I, like you, I didn't know anything about bartending or even English. So that was
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, I was one step ahead of you. At least I could speak English. So,
So you say, but yeah, okay.
but if I had gone to work in Paris, I would have had trouble. But
You would be exactly like me.
yeah. So that was my very first restaurant, and then I tended bar in a couple other places in Lincoln. I tended bar at this one place that was down at the right near the football stadium on campus, and
Right,
I originally tended bar there because my friend who owned the place would ask me to come and help out on Saturday mornings,
right.
because at 10 o'clock the place would fill. It would be packed with people just drinking as much as they could before the game. The game kickoffs was usually around noon or 12:30. So they'd just get hammered before they'd go to the state, because you couldn't buy any alcohol in the stadium because it was college ball and there was no.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
they would
Right.
just and then at like noon the place would just empty. There wouldn't be a soul left, and it would just be crazy. Now, people had very inventive ways of taking alcohol to the games. They had, those canes with the hollowed out canes that you
I've
could put.
seen that.
Yeah, and we had one
Wow.
guy, he had a wooden leg, and in his leg he kept this thing, a carafe full of, I think it was like rum and coke or something that he kept in there.
Whoa.
It was very funny. So so it was very crude bartending. It was nothing like what we do at Cesar now,
I
or
know,
or
right?
what or what most modern cocktail bars do
Ah,
today.
and I remember, I mean, just to give you a quick anecdote, you remember at Cesar when we started, we refused to do Long Island iced teas, remember?
Yeah,
Because the
we
people
do
that
them.
order the Long Island iced tea, we know what, what these are not, they don't want, they're not here to drink, they're here to get
It's such
trashed.
a silly drink because you don't taste any of the alcohol. I mean, you taste
That's the
alcohol,
goal.
but
That's the goal.
there's there's all there's white rum, tequila, gin, vodka. All those go in the drink, so you don't really taste any of them. It's just
And
and
there's
then
lemon and then Coca-Cola.
and then you finish it with Coke. So the resulting drink in a high glass, it looks like iced tea,
Yeah.
which is hence the name. And Long Island, because people on Long Island like to get hammered, I guess.
Is that
Um,
why now? I mean, you don't know why that's.
I think it was probably invented there, is my guess. I don't really know why it got that name, but because people drink them all over the place now. But it's really a drink for people that just want to drink and not really taste spirits, but just
Yeah, no,
drink.
no, yeah.
It's the same person that would drink a rum and Coke, or whiskey and Coke, or whatever. Seven
Almost.
and seven. Uh, Seven and
So,
seven was a very popular drink back in the day. I mean,
oh, it
that's what
was
people drank.
seven,
It
seven
was
and seven. It was,
Seagram 7, which was a blended
and it
American
was,
whiskey,
and the
and
CC7. Remember
and 7 was
CC7?
7 Up, and
And you remember CC7?
yeah, yeah,
Canadian Club.
Canadian Club, yeah. And it was great as a bartender because they were so easy to make, and you
Oh
could
my God.
make them in 2 seconds.
JD Coke, which is
Yep,
disgusting, but
yep, yep.
you know,
And
all this stuff, Bacardi and Coke. Oh my God, all this.
we used to drink these things called Purple Passions, which was pure grain alcohol mixed with grape juice. So it went,
Wow.
and they were ice cold. There were lots of ice, and you drink them, and you drink a couple of them down because they were just so delicious and refreshing. It was a hot summer day, and then all of a sudden you'd realize you couldn't move your feet. You couldn't. People would get so drunk on those things because it just would hit you. If you're drinking a martini, I mean, you could chug a martini too, but you tend not to. You kind of sip it, or a beer. You kind of know what you're getting. But with those things, you didn't taste it. So it was just like drinking grape juice, and you could just throw a couple back, and then
You
you'd
know,
just be.
it's funny. I was looking at, I would think, well, I know, there's a lot of people that are drinking more lately because of COVID, right? Because of,
Yeah,
not COVID, because of being home and being depressed and freaked out, right?
yeah.
I would think that with the danger of alcohol, that would be reduced a little, but it's not. It's going up and up.
Yeah.
Funny,
A
huh?
lot
I
of
mean,
people
come on.
say that's how they got through the pandemic
Oh yeah,
was
I mean,
alcohol. And
of course, man, you need something. I mean, seriously, you
I
can't
mean,
just.
I really believe in the cocktail hour. I really believe in taking time at the end of the workday to have a drink. It doesn't mean you got to have 5 drinks. It doesn't mean you got to get drunk. It just means having a drink that kind of takes the edge off your day. It relaxes you a little bit. I mean, and cocktail by cocktail, I mean, it can be a beer. It can be, you
Yeah,
can open a
like
bottle
a
of beer. You can
right.
have a
Yeah,
glass
yeah.
of wine.
And actually, that's not so bad. That's the thing. People that drink a little bit regularly don't have issues, and that's the
Yeah,
thing that
it's good for
needs
your
to be
heart.
understood. Now, the problem is the when you completely binge on the weekend and then you
Yeah,
stop, and then you binge and then you stop. That's kind of the
yeah, it's kind of
where your liver is
hard
not.
on your body.
"Wah."
Yeah, it's hard on your body. It's hard on your head the next day.
Right.
But I do
All right.
like to have a drink at night.
So, James, we need to start to talk about some of the ideas that we have. It's basically we're going to take some ingredients. We're going to go back to, talking about cheese and the charcuterie and the meats we found, all the vegetables, the roots
That's
and
right.
the spices, herbs. We're gonna have fun talking about all this. But we today we thought we'd talk
Well,
about
I wanted to mention something about ingredients, and the reason we want to talk about ingredients because um, I, as a food journalist for the past 25 years or 30 years or something, um, I've covered a lot of trade shows. I go to
right.
trade shows that are all about the specialty or the gourmet food industry, and you'd think that at these shows there'd be nothing but outstanding food, and there is a lot of outstanding food. About half of the fancy food show that happens twice a year in this country, in the summer it's in New York, and in the winter it's here in San Francisco, although it's now moved to Las Vegas. I don't know if that's temporary or permanent, but anyway, it's about half the show is great stuff, mostly imported from Europe. All the great cheeses, meats, olive oils, vinegars, all that stuff. It's an amazing place to see and taste all of this stuff. But a good half of the show is just prepared foods. And even though a lot of it starts with good ingredients and it's maybe, made in an artisanal way or whatever, it's still processed food. And there's a lot of fads at the show. And every
Yeah.
year there's something that is like, oh, this is the big food this year is chocolate covered potato chips or,
Yeah, I
you
know.
know,
Oh,
uh,
sure. Oh, God.
and sometimes
So,
it's a perfectly good ingredient. It'll be like, oh, this year it's all about Marcona almonds, and everything. Or I remember for 2 or 3 years, it was all about bacon, and everything had
oh
bacon in
yeah.
it. And you'd go around, and there was bacon candy, there was bacon spread, there was bacon jam, it was just in everything. And you know, not a bad thing, but it's kind of silly. So we thought we want to talk about real ingredients, things
Right.
that grow out of the ground or are raised or are somehow the base of something that you're going to manipulate into something else, whether it's an egg or a carrot or a piece of cheese.
I mean, James, we can talk about good product that you've seen. There's some good stuff.
Yeah,
We've seen some really good stuff at the show, but there's a lot of stuff that are completely useless, right? That's what
yeah,
you're referring,
yeah.
because there's some good stuff. There's people that work on the food and make amazing product like we see today.
Oh yeah.
And yeah,
And even the prepared stuff that you can buy, I mean, it's not necessarily bad. There's a lot of great things that are done for you. I mean,
yeah,
not
yeah,
everyone has the time or the inclination to cook. Some people just don't like to cook.
yeah.
Um, and I think people that say they don't have the time, I think they really just don't like to cook, because you can find the
Well,
time if you really like it.
it's you have to jump into that mode, and it's not obvious. I mean, it could be difficult if you have no idea what you're doing, because the task is looking like it's really hard. But then once you get into it, I know, because we have a lot of we started the 12-week series that our landmark, our most important class, and the 12-week series that we have. I mean, they're all sold out. We have 5 of them going on, all sold out, because people are really looking for. And I'm doing also a virtual one that's doing well also. I think some people, they want to learn from their kitchen, which is great. So I have both. I have virtual and in person. The
Right.
in person, they really want to have a chef with them in the kitchen. Small classes of 12 people. We're gonna post the new one, I think, for July or something. I don't know. We're not sure yet. But the virtual one is really cool because then, even if you're like not really comfortable in the comfort of your house, it's much easier. So we see people are really wanted to learn about food and health. You can see that it's very, very important. So I want to make sure that we provide enough information so they made the right choices. Like,
Hmm.
I know we want to talk about cheese today a little bit. What is a good decision? What does that mean? Like, when you buy cheese, like what,
Oh,
people ask me all the time, well, how do I know it's good? I'm like, well, usually you look at the price because
yeah.
there's no, it's, I
Well,
mean,
there's a couple things.
I don't know what you think about, but I would not say if the cheese is well made, I don't think there's a bad cheese, right? I mean,
No,
it's quality
I
wise, right?
I sort of I sort of divide cheese up into four categories. There's first of all there's commodity cheese, which is just really mass produced cheese. It's mostly like cheddar, Monterey Jack, those kind of things that you find at a big supermarket, and they make cheddar in a big block, and then it just is sliced off and wrapped, so you can pick up a little 2-inch or 1-inch piece of cheddar cheese or Monterey Jack, and it's not terribly expensive. There's nothing wrong with it per se. It's not very interesting. It's mostly if you want to melt some cheese over your,
Right.
nachos or whatever. It's perfectly good cheese.
But
It's just
I
not
would,
very interesting.
but James, okay, I'm sorry to cut you, but I would think that if you get cheese that you're going to put in your body, don't you want something good all the time? I
Right.
mean,
Well, that's what I was going to say is that the problem with commodity cheese is that in order to make cheese in that quantity, they have to really run it like a factory, and that includes the dairy animals. So you've got herds of hundreds and hundreds of cows that are in a tight space. They don't have the facilities to let them graze on land, so they just get fed grain every day, which they're not really designed to eat. And so there's problems with methane. There's problems with all the runoff from everything. There's the health and welfare of the animals. I mean, these animals don't live a particularly pleasant life. Some are better than others, but um, a cow really needs to be in a field. It really needs to be out on a grassy field and eat grass. They're designed to eat grass. Their whole
yeah.
digestive
So
system is designed to take grass, which is virtually useless to
stay
us,
away.
virtually useless to us, and they convert it into a very high quality protein, whether it's meat or milk. So you start with commodity cheese. The next step up would be what I call specialty cheese. Now, these are cheeses that are made in factories still, both large and small, but they're made with the idea in mind that they want to somehow capture the essence of the milk. They're concerned with flavor, typically smaller herds of cattle. It's a much smaller model, so it's better for the planet, it's better for the animals, and you end up with more interesting cheeses. The next level up is artisan cheese, which these are cheeses that are made in very small quantities by hand, the way cheese was originally made. And it doesn't necessarily mean they can't make a lot of cheese. I mean, some artisan cheeses, they can really turn out a lot of cheese if they've got a source of enough milk. They can make a lot of cheese. And then there's another type of artisan cheese that's also a farmstead cheese, which means they have their own herd of animals. So all the milk comes from their own herd of animals, whether it's goats or cows or sheep. And the reason that makes a difference, of course, is because they can control what the
Right.
animals eat, how they live, everything. They can control everything about that cheese from the moment that dairy animal's born to the final cheese that goes out the door heading for the store. So,
Now,
um,
James, when I went to see the farm, I was at you know that I'm so sorry, I forgot. There's a farm that is up north, and they were buying milk from other supplier, and it's still a very good
yeah,
cheese making. Humboldt. So
Humboldt, yeah. Humboldt Fog.
So some people buy some good milk
Yeah,
also. Right.
yeah.
Okay.
An artisan cheesemaker, if it's not a farmstead cheese, it means they buy their milk. And there's a certain logic to that too, because raising dairy animals is a full-time job and it's a whole thing unto itself. And cheese making is a whole nother thing. So a lot of people choose to separate that and they buy their milk, but you buy your milk from somebody that you have certain people that you contract with and you work with them to have a say in how these animals are raised, how they eat, how everything happens. And they're close by, so the milk doesn't travel very far, because you want that milk to be processed as quickly as possible. You don't want it sitting around in storage tanks. You want to take that milk and immediately get it into a cheese vat and start adding the cultures and the rennet and all that stuff and getting the party started right away. You're less likely to have problems with the cheese that way, and the milk is much fresher. It's much better. It's all of that. So when you're looking to buy cheese, I mean, obviously, if you go to Safeway, you're going to buy mostly commodity cheese. By the
They
way,
have
there's another level of commodity cheese that the government makes out of surplus milk that's really, really bizarre stuff. I'm talking about the kind of cheese you could buy at Safeway. It's
well. So I'm not a big fan of Safeway, but I mean
no,
they do have good cheese also. I've
yeah,
seen.
they do.
So
More and more they
they
do.
do one thing that's good. I mean, good. At least they offer some other options, which I appreciate.
Yes.
Not that I shop a lot in there, but just to tell you that you can find, at Safeway you can find some good shit. Not my
Yeah.
favorite place.
Another way to buy cheese, if you can, is to go to a cheese shop. A good cheese shop where they have people there that actually know something about cheese. I mean, the
Right.
trouble with buying cheese at a supermarket, even if they have good cheese, there's no one to really talk to. So if you haven't done the research yourself, you're kind of at a loss, and there's no, you can't go up to the cashier at the front of the store and say, "Can you tell me the difference between these two manchegos?" They're
Can
going to
you go
look at
to
you like you're speaking Greek, and
Can you go to the front and with a knife and say, "Can I try this? Do you have any crackers?"
yeah, can I taste this before I buy it? And they're like, yeah, you can buy it and then you can taste it. So if you go to a cheese shop, and sometimes that's a shop within another store. I mean, there are big, specialty food stores that have a cheese department where they have cheesemongers that know about the cheeses, they care for the cheeses, they offer tastes. And then there are standalone cheese shops. These are great way to buy cheese. Even if you don't buy all your cheese there, it's a great place to learn about cheese because you can taste. It's like going to a bar and trying different whiskeys. You can taste a whiskey without having to buy a whole bottle of it. At a cheese
You
shop,
mean the,
you can
you mean when you do the tester, the thing? What is that called?
do flights.
Yeah, flights.
Yeah, or just,
Okay.
order a whiskey and try it, and the next time you try a different one and whatever. And with
Right.
cheese, it's the same way. If you go to a good cheesemonger, these are people that care about their cheeses. They know a lot about cheese. Chances are they've visited farms, they've been with dairy animals, so they can help guide you through the process. And the better the cheese, the more expensive it's going to be. I mean, that's just
Right.
the way it
Exactly.
is.
Right. And yeah,
It,
it's really expensive to run a farm. This is something that we're gonna bring a couple of farmers on the show, right? Like we did last
yeah,
time. We had the girls from Cowgirls Creamery. We can talk about. I want to invite one of those people pretty soon, so people can understand the amount of money and work it takes to keep a
it's
farm going, right?
there are no days off. If you're raising dairy animals, you don't say, well, we're going on vacation for 2 weeks, so we'll just, not milk the cows for 2 weeks. No, can't do that. You got to milk them every day. You make cheese every day. I mean, not all people that raise dairy animals make cheese. Most of them just sell their milk off to somebody else, whether they sell it to
Right.
a big factory or whether they sell it to some artisan cheesemaker.
What
That's
about
up
these
to them.
guys?
But look at them little goats. They're at Redwood Hill Farm. Now, Redwood Hill Farm is interesting because she began, um, Jennifer Beese.
Oh my God! Hey James, I'm sorry to cut you, but look who's
What?
here.
Oh, All right.
Kenny, oh my God, good to see you, man. Long time. That's so funny.
So Redwood Hill Farm is an example of somebody that began with the goats, and then she began to make cheese and yogurt. And then after many, many years of doing that and winning all kinds of awards and winning a lot of prestige in the industry, she decided she didn't want to do that anymore. And so she sold off the cheese making part of the business to this French company that has maintained their standards and their quality. And Jennifer now just takes care of the goats.
Wow.
And it's hard. It's hard to do both. To raise the animals, milk the animals, and make the cheese it's almost like having two different full-time careers that you have to do simultaneously, and it's very, very difficult to do. And so most people choose one or the other. They either want to be, and typically the people that raise dairy animals, they've done it for generations, most of them. And the people that make cheese just make cheese, and occasionally you see both, but it's hard. So
It's super hard. Kenny, we miss you too, man. We miss like a lot of the people that we used to have on the show. They're coming back, so it's cool.
yes,
All the
good.
people are like, yeah, excited. Awesome. I see your little girl grow up, huh? God.
Now, I'd like to say too that in the beginning, when cheese was first being, I mean, 100 years ago or 200 years ago, if you went to Europe, any cheese was a farmstead cheese because people didn't buy milk; they just milked their animals and they made cheese. And they might only make half a dozen cheeses and take them to the market on Saturday and sell them, but that's what they would do.
So
Now
that
we have trucks and refrigeration, so there are options about how to move milk around and all that. So it's changed a lot, but cheese is still made the same way it was made 1,000 years ago.
I know. There's one little change in, I think, in some of the farm. I know it happened in France. They replaced the wood with plastic, and they realized that plastic brought a bunch of weird mold
Yeah.
or weird bacteria, and they went back to the wood aspect. They thought wood was a terrible idea, right? And I think they went back because something, the Parmesan was put on
Yeah.
some plastic, and you get,
And when you talk about wood, you're really talking about the shelves that cheeses are aged on.
yeah.
There are some cheeses where the wood is as much a part of the cheese making process as anything
Well,
else.
James, I'm
Gruyere
sorry,
is a good example.
James,
Gruyere
James,
has special red wood that they
right.
use that adds something to the cheese, and it collects a
Jim,
certain, yeah,
just like wine and alcohol,
right,
right?
right, absolutely. And
So I'm
I
sorry.
don't want to,
Yeah. So basically, they are on shelves, and they are important. The wood is important there, right?
yeah. I mean, some of them use stainless steel. They use like metro shelving, so it's that ribbed stainless steel that they'll do cheeses on those sometimes, which is fine. Plastic is the worst
Yeah,
because it
yeah.
doesn't, it holds
It doesn't
bacteria
breathe.
too long, and it doesn't breathe, and it doesn't add anything. It only adds bad things. So it's like the difference between a wood cutting board and a plastic cutting board. Wood is always better because
And
it's,
that's why when you put protein or anything in plastic, it stinks, right?
yeah,
Look at fish. Best example. When you get your fish from the fishmonger or from your store, you have to put it out of the plastic and put it into a tray on parchment. I'll show you all this.
yeah,
Otherwise, that thing is going to stink. It's like, anything. Just,
yeah. We
anyway.
used to do a dinner every week with our youngest stepdaughter and her family. They would come over and they would often bring the protein. So one week he dropped off the fish in the morning
Right.
for that night, and it was funky. It was funky because they had gotten it from their supplier, but they hadn't done anything to it. So they just put the cheese in the wrapper in the fridge and left it there for a day. And so we told him, no, what you got to do when you get home, you got to take that fish out of there, put it in a little baking dish and just cover it. That's all you got to do. But you don't want to leave it in that. Yes, I've had Gruyere and Gruyere as well, and it's an amazing cheese, and it is fun to watch it being made. And of course, where they make it is just absolutely breathtakingly beautiful.
So let me take you about the Alps. There's a question about the Alps. One thing that's very interesting about the Alps is I don't know if you guys know, but there's a lot of cheese in the Alps that's loaded with omega-3, and the reason for that is omega-3 is a anti-freeze. So think about it like, it's in the grass, so the grass doesn't break, literally doesn't disappear.
Right.
So the cows that are eating the cheese, the grass from way up in the Alps, there's a lot of omega-3 in there, tons. And that's one of the reasons, right? And one of the things that Jens was saying earlier, he said, grass-fed cows. So it's interesting today that we have to call the natural stuff with an extra adjective,
Right.
where the crappy food has none of it. Like if I say grass-fed, yeah, that's what they eat. So it's a cow.
Right.
And if I say farmer's market, yeah, the market come from the farm. All
Right.
these extra denominative. Why do
Or
we need that?
we have to say natural food or organic food. And these are all things that, like, my grandfather would have just called food. And
Right.
grass-fed milk would have just been called milk. There was no other kind of milk. What else is there besides grass-fed milk? That's what cows eat.
So
In Switzerland, by the way, they still have a very, very strong tradition of they move the cattle up into the high Alps in the
yeah,
summertime, where they
right,
eat this amazing grass,
right,
like you say,
right,
full of omega-3s. And then they bring them back down in the
right.
fall before winter sets in. But
Because
then
there's no more
even
grass.
right, and
Because there's no
even when
more
they're
grass.
back down in the valley, they're eating nothing but fresh straw and hay that's
Yep.
been grown down there all summer and then cut and dried, and
Yeah.
then that's what they eat. So the milk is extraordinary, and that's why these cheeses are still as great
Yeah.
as they were 1,000 years ago. Gruyere, Emmental, which is the classic
Absolutely.
Swiss cheese.
And to answer your question, Kenneth, yes, we have made cheese. We have classes on how to make cheese. I have two chefs. One is Maria, Chef Maria. She's from Italy. She makes a class on how to make your old what is that? She makes
Burrata,
mozzarella. She makes burrata.
nice.
It's really easy, right?
Yeah, probably some version of provolone too. Those are all pasta filata cheeses with a stretched pulled curd that gets heated and gets sort of elastic. Great stuff. Yeah, I've made cheese. I've been I've been in countless cheese factories, both huge factories down to little operations where one person makes every cheese by hand. So yeah,
Wow. So how
I've
long
been
does it
around
take?
cheese.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and it depends on the kind of cheese. I mean, in Gruyere,
Move.
ooh, yes. In Gruyere, the when they make the actual Swiss cheeses, the big wheels with the holes in it that most people just refer to as Swiss cheese. That's Emmental cheese, named for the Emmental Valley. Those things, the cheesemaker makes one of those every day. He collects the milk from the dairies. All the milk gets collected, goes to the cheesemaker, and he makes one or two of those wheels a day. That's it.
Wow.
And they weigh about
Wow,
200
crazy.
pounds. They're huge. You can't see where my hands are, but the wheel's about this big.
It's like the fish that you fished this morning, right?
Yeah, like
It's
the fish I
it's that
caught.
it's that big.
Yeah. Um, and that's why this is another topic for another day, but it's why names of cheeses are so important, because in America, you can go to any supermarket and buy Swiss cheese. And that 9 times out of 10, that cheese has never seen Switzerland. It has nothing to do with Swiss cheese. It's just called that because they use the specific enzymes to make those bubbles and make those holes in the
Okay.
cheese. So it
So
looks like it has a similar flavor, but it's nothing at all like real cheese from Switzerland. The cheese is the real Emmental. The flavor is so deep.
oh, I know.
It's so delicious.
The raclette. I had a raclette with my brother actually 2 months ago, and Lisa, my business partner, his wife. Man, that was cool.
Yeah,
I,
raclette's
I think
great.
it's time to do it again. Yes, raclette is always a good idea, right?
And
It's
Kenny,
really cool to share.
he mentioned ricotta. Ricotta is actually a byproduct of the cheese making process, because when you make cheese, you drain off the whey, and smart cheesemakers use that whey for something. They either feed it to the animals, like the pigs especially love whey, or you make ricotta. Ricotta means to recook, and so you take that ricotta and you cook it again, you add new enzymes, and you make this new product, which is ricotta, which can be aged or it can be really fresh and creamy.
Chance,
Really good stuff.
let me ask you something, restaurant even. Let me ask you something. What is for the people that are listening? What is the whey?
Whey is the liquid part of the milk. When you make the most, at its most simplest, to make cheese, you add a rennet, which is an agent that coagulates the milk, and it separates the solids, which is the curd, C-U-R-D, from the whey, W-H-E-Y, like Little Miss Muffet and her eating her curds and whey. And that's what you do. You separate the curds from the whey, you drain off the whey, and you're left with this solid mass that you put in molds and you make cheese. And the
Ricotta?
whey, like I said, you can do anything with it. You can feed it to the pigs. You can make ricotta. There are other things you can do with it. You're right, Kenny. It's not like just saying sausage. There are
Okay, yeah, right.
a million different
So,
kinds of cheese.
so whey has a lot of protein, tons of protein. That's why it's used to in protein powders.
Yeah, I mean, the more cheese you make, the more whey you're going to have, and you've got to do something with it. You can't just you could just dump it somewhere, but that would be not only not good for the environment, but also it's just incredibly wasteful. I mean, this is a highly nutritious, still viable product.
Right.
You don't want to just get rid of it. You want to do
So,
something with it.
so it's a little bit like the yogurt water. People
Kind of,
dump
yeah.
that.
Yeah,
Don't
absolutely.
dump it. So basically,
Yeah.
you guys, yogurts are good if they are not sweetened, huh? But you know that. I mean, everybody knows that,
And
right?
also a
It's clear.
yogurt that you've got to stir. Once a yogurt's been open and you've taken some out, and the next day you open it up again, and there's like in the hole where you took there's water. You don't want to dump that off. You want to just stir it back in. And that's a good sign. That means that this is real yogurt made with real active cultures, and it's it's good stuff. And you just stir it back in, just stir it up and eat it.
Don't throw it away. Like don't throw it away. It's really it's super good for you. This is where all the proteins are and lots of the nutrients. So
Now, another day, I want to get into a conversation and talk about how these different cheeses became what they are, because it all has to do with terroir. It has to do with the bacteria that naturally occurs in these different places, and it's very interesting. It's very complex. I'll try to make it as simple as possible. I'm
James,
certainly no scientist, but although I
let me
play
ask you.
one on TV. What?
Let me ask you, what is terroir? You're talking about terroir
Terroir.
like you're talking about terroir like you're talking about wine.
Terroir, the terminology comes from the wine world, and it means the overall effect of the geography, the climate, the terrain, everything where that wine is made and how it affects the final product. So if you
So
grow the
terroir,
same grape in one place, in one kind of soil, with one kind of climate and atmosphere, and then you
right.
take it to the other side of the world and you grow it in a drier, maybe colder atmosphere, whatever, something different, it's going
So
to be a different grape.
wait, James. You don't have to take it to the other side of the world to have a different cheese.
Yeah, you can take it
Sometimes,
to the other side of the road.
right, or the road, or the other side of the hill. Right, there's a hill that will be on the sun. One is not on the sun. The
Right,
gravel is different, right? You don't have to be far, right?
right. And in France, when you eat, if you're ever fortunate enough to go to France and eat real unpasteurized goat's milk cheeses, some of the great chefs of France, sometimes you can taste the different cheese. You can taste the
Oh yeah.
wildflowers. You can taste the herbs, and this
You
is what
can
the
test.
goats are
You can
eating on
test.
the hillside.
We can test what the animal were eating. Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, it's true. And then, so basically, the terroir, it's from the word terre. Terre is ground or earth, and terroir is that's what it means. It's from the ground. and you can definitely taste the food. Now there is raw milk cheese here.
Sure.
A cheese board right across the street from Kitchen on Fire. This is something that is incredible. You guys, I'm sure you know cheese board, but if you don't know, you need to go, absolutely. And you can try those raw milk cheese. I buy a lot of raw milk cheese actually because I think they're great. They taste phenomenal. They're expensive, but oh
Yeah,
well.
and when I talk about going to France to eat raw milk goat cheese, it's because these cheeses are eaten relatively young. They're not aged very long. So
Hmm.
the USDA importing laws here in America, you cannot import a raw milk cheese unless it's been aged for more than 60 days because they've
I
determined
thought
that the
I thought that was
huh?
45 days, but okay, it's 60 days.
No, 60 days because they determined that that's how long the
Right.
Listeria
Yeah.
bacteria can live in the cheese, and
Right.
after that it dies. So,
Because so
um,
you guys understand how it works, right? The cheese pasteurizes itself
right,
naturally. Do you understand the
basically, yeah,
concept? The concept is
the
basically
enzymes work to kill the
it's
bad
self
stuff
it's
and
self
grow the good
pasteurized.
stuff.
So
Yeah,
when you see a raw milk that is 45 days to 60 days, it's very safe to eat. I know because lots of people ask me, "Well, is it?" Yeah, it's safe.
yeah,
It's fermented. Don't worry about it. But
right. Now you can make raw milk cheese here, like for example a brie. A brie is a cheese that doesn't age for very many days or weeks, so we can't import raw milk brie because it's just not aged. If you age a brie for 60 days, it's done, it's gone. You wouldn't want to eat it. So, but you can make them here, but it's very difficult. The laws are very strict, and
about the brie,
it's
about the
much harder to work with raw milk. You've got to really know what you're doing, and you've got to make sure you have a market for it so that you can sell it immediately. You don't want it sitting around. And so most cheesemakers choose to pasteurize their milk. However, there are several ways to pasteurize milk, and the way they do it in factory dairy world is the milk is heated to a very, very high level of heat for a long period of time, and it just basically kills everything in it. Now, that means it also kills all the stuff that creates flavor, so they've got to add back flavor into the cheese. But there are ways to gently pasteurize milk that doesn't kill everything, so you can still make really flavorful sort of classic cheeses that aren't necessarily raw milk. We'll get into that another day, but it's interesting. And
well,
the
we are going
fact
to
is,
talk. I want you to discuss the process another time, so we'll put
yeah,
that. I want you to show the process, and we maybe will take some pictures, or maybe we'll go to the farm and we can do a show over there because now we can move again.
I'd like
So
to do that this spring. Go and visit a farm. Maybe we go up
yeah,
to
and then
Redwood
we
Hill
can do the
Farm.
show from there, right?
Yeah, yeah. Interview the goats. They have more to say than you'd think. And you know what? The great thing about interviewing goats is they're very opinionated. Cows,
Yeah,
not so much.
once you catch them, though, because they're hard to catch, huh?
Cows don't really like to be interviewed. They don't talk much.
No,
Goats are very
they
opinionated.
chew,
So,
they chew. So you have a
um,
bunch of bacteria in your Kenneth. You need to run.
well, in a cheese factory, you want to be careful that you don't wash away too much of these natural yeasts that grow on the walls. I mean, you really it aids in the cheese making. And in a big gleaming stainless steel and tile factory, a lot of that stuff doesn't exist, so it's all added to the milk.
So
But in a
that's why,
real artisan,
right? So deliberate bacteria. Yeah, yeah, sure, Kenny. The bacteria means that it's a mold. So the cheese is actually a penicillium. So they have a different type of penicillium, and I know we're going to talk about that a lot. But it's a penicillium, and it's kind of a. So when you say it was on the mold, that's what gives that cheese. It's mold. It's yeast. The yeast is floating. Then the same for bread. When you do a sourdough, you can put some flour with some water, and you can leave it just like that. And when you come back a day later or a few years later, the yeast already is starting to act. So it's really
Right.
in the air. So you understand why James was saying that if it's on the, like an old cheese place has mold in the air, that's how the cheese is made. This is
Right.
important, right?
It's also important to think about this, that cheese is just like olive oil, like vinegar, like even bread to a certain extent. It's about preservation. It's taking a product that is extremely perishable. Milk only stays good for a day or two. Outside of refrigeration, not even that. And you're taking it and you're transforming it into something that can be aged, that can be carried with you, that can be shipped around the world.
Right. And
And
that
it was discovered by accident, but once they figured out how to do it and they started making it in different places and coming up with these different, and then they learned how to age cheeses, it changed the world. I mean, the
there's two things that
Romans
happen
marched
though.
around the world with pieces of Romano cheese in their
Yeah.
pockets because they could
So
carry it for miles.
two things happen on this part. It's there's a very, very, very old, long time ago, they discovered that actually cheese was much easier to digest. That was one thing.
Yeah,
And the other thing is
because the
it's
lactose is gone.
transportable, like you said. So
Yeah,
there's way two aspects here. It's the transport and the fact that we can keep it and make more, and the fact that it's actually more digestible because it looks like, and this is from evolution, evolutionary, what you can see science or DNA, changes in the human body. It looks like lactose was really not very easy to digest for us.
yeah,
We got to be more prone to eat lactose, 15,000 years ago,
something
12,000
like
years
that.
ago. It's not perfect for everyone because some people still cannot eat either the casein, which is a protein from the milk, or the lactose. But that's how it started. We started to assimilate the cheese better. And then because the milk was around and we started to have agriculture, which is about 18,000 years ago or something, then that's how we started to eat, wheat and milk and stuff and stuff and stuff. But this
Right.
is pretty recent because when you look at evolution is much bigger than that. And
Yeah.
the last 15, 18,000 years is when the agriculture started. And this is a lot of the disease happened. So we have to figure out which one was wrong, right?
Well,
Probably
and
eating
and
too much
and a
carb. But
lot of places, milk was not part of the culture. So, like in Japan, for example, up until pretty recently, relatively recently, people didn't consume dairy products, so they had no capacity to do so.
they had
So
soy
when,
milk.
yeah, yeah. So when, people would come here from Japan and they'd eat ice cream and they'd say, "Oh, this is delicious," but then they'd have a stomach ache and they couldn't handle it.
Right,
That's
right.
changing because they are eating more dairy these days, but traditionally it
So,
wasn't part of the diet like it was in Europe or Central
right.
Asia or
So we can, so we have 5 more minutes, James, and we can just, before we go to the next week, we can say that milk was not part of the culture. That's funny.
yeah.
Uh,
That's a
Actually,
dad
no,
joke. No.
no, it is a bad joke. No,
I
the
thought of
point
it when I
is,
said it, but I let it slide.
the point is, just so you understand, the whole point of the discussion is microbes were able to enable us to eat more stuff that was available. And the microbes it makes us eat, the grapes, so make it so we could keep it and make wine. The milk became cheese, the wheat became bread, and on and on. And pickling, and for example, when you look at cabbage was extremely poisonous. Raw cabbage, wild cabbage is
Hmm.
super poisonous. It's full of isocyanate. It's a poison. But as the what is that called? The cultivar, we made it so we can eat
Right.
it now. But other than that, it was pickled or fermented or what do you call that? The kimchi,
Right. It's fermented. It's a fermented
fermented,
food.
right?
I mean, without these microbes, without these
Right.
wild yeasts and all
Yeah.
these little microscopic creatures that transform food, we wouldn't be alive. We couldn't
Yeah,
survive without
that's
them.
true. It's control rotting. Yes, exactly. It's
Controlled
all
rotting. I have a friend that he coined the phrase. He said, "Cheese is all about controlled spoilage." You're really
uh,
taking a product and you're controlling how it goes bad.
Right. Great, huh?
Vinegar is wine that's gone bad, but if you control it and you do it in the right environment, it becomes this tremendously wonderful and delicious product that's actually
Right.
quite good for us.
And
So
James, you were telling me a story, which I had the same story when people say they look at the vinegar actually one and they're like, "Chef, I think your vinegar is bad."
yeah, and it's like, no, it already went bad.
I'm like, "Yeah, it is bad,"
Yeah,
and
if they
that's
see
why
them, if they see the mother in the vinegar, which means that it's a
I
natural
want it. I
vinegar.
want bad stuff, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And
People
all
get
right,
very
and then
squeamish in
and then
modern society about food, and the fact is
so
that the food is a messy business, and
right,
it's all part of the cycle. It's all part of
right.
nature, and
So basically, to keep the conversation about the microbe before we leave, is basically do not forget that those microbes have created our microbiome. So now
yeah,
we have a microbiome that needs to eat its food, and we can't just not give it to it. So when you eat processed food, you destroy your microbiome, and your microbiome is the only thing that can protect you from disease. So this is we're gonna leave it like this, but we'll talk about that more obviously, right?
yeah,
And
yeah.
yes.
It's
Oh, right, Kenny. Before we go, remind us what you do. I know you're in food, some type of inspector or something.
well, and he's
So
had a
people,
restaurant. He said,
I
'cause he
thought
used
he
to
was some
aged
type of
meats.
uh, I
He's a
forgot.
spy, is what he is. He's a spy.
Is a spy or a spider? Which one?
Yeah. Well, it's sad because there's a lot of people in the world,
What's sad?
especially in
Can
especially
you sad? No, Kenny's not
no,
sad.
no, no, he doesn't seem sad at all. But there's a lot of people, especially in this country, that the only food they ever see is coming out of a package, whether it's a fast
Yeah,
food
yeah,
container
crazy.
or a box from the supermarket or something, coming out of a microwave, and they really don't know where food comes from. And so when they see the process of making food, they get very freaked out about it. They don't want to know that, they don't want to see the food in its original state, and they don't even understand what that original state was. And that's very sad because we lose that connection to food, and
Totally.
and we suffer for it.
Oh
We
yeah.
do suffer for it.
Well, because
They
now people are afraid of food. That's mostly what happened. People are
Yeah.
really, they have a fear of food. It's crazy. I mean, we
There's
have
an
to
old
stop.
there's an old saying that politics is like making sausage. You don't want to see the process. You just want to see the end result. And that saying comes from the world of factory food, because you don't want to see how Oscar Mayer makes their products. You really don't. You don't want to know what goes in there. But really good sausage, like we've got some local sausage people here in
Like
Berkeley and in the
Bartoli,
Bay Area.
what's his name? Bartoli.
Framani, Paul Bertoli makes
Our
fabulous stuff.
friend
Now,
is, oh, we should have him on the show.
yeah. Now you couldn't go in and see how they make sausage at Framani because they are so concerned about food safety that they don't let anyone in the sausage making room. But if you could get a camera in there and watch them make it, it's it's not it's not bad at all. I mean, they're using really fine meat and spices,
Yeah,
and
well, that's the thing.
it's beautiful food, and it's preservation at its
Let's have him on the show.
highest.
I'll call him. He's a good friend.
Yeah,
Paul.
I know Paul very well. Yeah, he'd probably love to be on the show.
Yeah.
He's a
Well,
very interesting and intelligent guy.
we were going to do that, and then we
You've
had
built and run 3 restaurants. Did they all fail? So are you telling me you're not a good restaurant owner?
Oh my God.
I'm kidding. They were probably great restaurants, especially if you had a room and you were aging your steaks. That's
Oh
that's the way to
wow.
that's the way to
That's
serve
crazy, man.
steaks.
Well, Kenny, we're gonna go. We'll see you next week probably. Great to see you again.
Yes,
Great to see
please.
everyone. You guys, we're gonna do more. We have a couple of weeks before we have our first guest. And then if anybody in the food business, not famous, wants to join, that'd be great.
If you're infamous, that's okay, but
yeah.
not famous.
Yeah, we don't want famous. I mean, famous, they have their run. They talk. It's enough. We want to hear from the other people, right?
Right.
So
I mean, and everybody that does something probably wants to promote what they do, and that's fine. We want to promote it
great,
too.
yeah,
We want to know what you do and get the word out
right,
there.
absolutely, because
But
we
we
need
like
to.
to give a voice to people that don't necessarily have a voice out in the media. So that's what we're going to look for. We might have a few well-known folks too, because a lot of the so
we're
well,
here
we're
for you,
almost out
man.
of time. I'll just say that we're going to be back. That's not a threat; it's a promise, and we'll be here every week at this time. And we look forward to being back, and we look forward to talking about food.
Thank you, James. Thank you, Kenny. We'll see you next week, noon. What
1
to
o'clock. 1 o'clock
2,
Pacific
and
Standard
then
Time.
yeah, I know, right?
Yeah, I even put
Hey,
on a shirt for the show. So there
all
we
right,
go.
you guys. Thank you, thank you. See you soon. Bye, James.
Sayonara.